Hi everyone. Happy Friday. It's all over here. We're very exciting conversation today with Ari. Ari, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, no, Olga, thank you so much for having me. I'm Ari Redbord. I am head of legal and government affairs at TRM Labs, the blockchain intelligence company. Olga, really, thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to be on with you today.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. You have such a fascinating background, and we've recently had a conversation. Have been living parallel lives, working for slightly different people, but then ending up in the same more or less place over time. So, really want to talk a little bit more about it, and specifically, I guess you started as a prosecutor. I want to hear all about it and your path to where you are today.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I relatively recently left the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, and I had this unique, understanding that I was probably leaving the coolest law job that I ever will have. I will say that I think I may have found a cooler one, but we'll sort of get to that in a moment. I started at the U.S. Attorney's Office really about 14 years ago. I think one sort of thing that's really interesting baseline is that, so the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia is the only U.S. Attorney's Office in the country that is also the local prosecutor for its jurisdiction. So there's no state's attorney, there's no district attorney for D.C. We were the local prosecutor. So, drug crimes, gun crimes, homicide, sex offense, those cases are prosecuted out of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Which makes it the biggest U.S. Attorney's Office in the country, because you're essentially combining the DA function with that federal prosecutor function. So, I started out, 14 years ago prosecuting domestic violence misdemeanor cases in our superior court, and really just fell in love with those cases. I never realized how impactful they would be, I think, to my career and my life. And then kind of steadily worked my way through sort of more and more serious crimes, but always staying with that sort of, from domestic violence misdemeanors to domestic violence felonies, up through child abuse and so on, and really felt a true impact for getting to do that work. And then I kept going from there at the U.S. Attorney's Office and did a number of other things.
14 years at the U.S. Attorney Office. That's a long time. It sounds like your job has changed a few times. Would love to kind of understand, one, being somewhere for 14 years, how do you get up in the morning and still want to be there? What keeps you up there? 14 years, a few things have changed. Would love to kind of understand that progression.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, sort of like I mentioned, I started out sort of really focused on sex offense, child exploitation, human trafficking. But I spent about half my time at the U.S. Attorney's Office doing that work. But then sort of like you said, you're changing, you're keeping it fresh. And the beauty of being a prosecutor, or really any litigator, is that you're just motivated and driven by your cases. And those cases are constantly changing and evolving. I found myself spending about 7 years in the national security section of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. So I was prosecuting terrorism cases, espionage, threat finance, so terrorist financing, money laundering, as well as sort of violent crime cases involving terrorist acts. So,
it's a lot of variety.
It's a lot of variety. And I think, to your question, it's really that constant change, which is just really keeps you motivated and excited. I will say there's another aspect to this that I think you'll really appreciate, Olga, and that is getting to work with great teams. As a prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, you are on a mission. And there's so many people with you on that mission, extraordinary prosecutors, but also agents. I had such a great experiences working with, HSI agents, FBI, IRSCI, and just a handful of others that really just, you feel like you're in lockstep with like-minded people, really working on a mission to keep America safe. And that eventually started a real focus on me working to keep the financial system safe. And that's sort of part of my journey to TRM.
Yeah, what I find is that people who stay on a job more than 5 years, it's usually two things. And I think you sort of very much highlighted it. One is their job is not the same when they started. They effectively change their jobs 2 or 3 times, but every 2 or 3 years. But their paycheck just happens to come from the same place. They almost never do the same job for 14, 20 years. I think that's one. And two, the team and people you work for and with, and I guess three, the mission. So it sounds like that was happening for you quite a lot, and kept you at there. What happened after U.S. Attorney office?
It was so cool. I really became passionate at the U.S. Attorney's office. I was part of a team that sort of stood up a threat finance unit within the office. And I think one of our real focuses was following the money. And I think what I learned is that even all the different kinds of cases that I'm describing, child exploitation, human trafficking, terrorist financing, everything from, export control, espionage, really, these cases are financial cases, right? It's these days, following the money is what you do in any investigation. And I really became passionate about that, so much so that I ended up leaving the U.S. Attorney's office and going over to the Treasury Department, where I was a senior advisor to the Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. And, as you know, that's the role that oversees OFAC and FinCEN and really the entire national security apparatus within Treasury. And that was sort of a very logical step from prosecuting cases involving threat finance to really go working with the policy makers in that space as well. And so I think Treasury really allowed me to get maybe a little bit of a higher level perspective. I wasn't able to just sort of tunnel vision, laser focus on my cases. I was able to sort of say, all right, how did the work I was doing at the U.S. Attorney's Office help shape, the policy perspective that we're thinking about?
Yeah, we have a few people joining. Hi, Colin. Good to have you here as well. Thank you for saying hi. Let's talk about Treasury. That's the one place that is very important, but it's not on most people's radar. It's very misunderstood. Let's talk about various agencies that it oversees and the impact it may have on our financial systems.
No, that's a great question, because I think when people think of Treasury, or at least when they used to think of Treasury, they used to think of monetary policy. And that's obviously a huge part of the work that the department has been doing, particularly sort of in the COVID CARES Act space right now, thinking about, all right, how do we get the economy running? What domestic finance issues? But what I really focused on was anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. How do we stop the bad guys from getting the money to do bad things? And, Treasury actually has some of the most important, tools in our anti-money laundering arsenal. For example, I was in working for the Undersecretary who oversaw OFAC, and that is really the sanctions arm of the U.S. government. So anytime you would see an action taken anywhere in the world, the maximum pressure campaign on Iran, what was going on in North Korea, Venezuela, that was run out of the Department of Treasury, OFAC. And similarly, FinCEN is the financial regulator when it comes to anti-money laundering in the United States. That's our FIU. And so all the terrific advisories that you've seen come out, for me, in these days, there's a real focus on cryptocurrency, and FinCEN's really leading the charge as the regulator in that space as well, again, on the anti-money laundering side.
Yeah, I've become very familiar with Treasury my previous jobs when I was on the intersection of smart contracts and security, and I was very knee deep in that, and discovered this whole world of Treasury and its power and its ability to have impact on technology, and was deeply fascinated by it, which is one of many reasons why I found your background fascinating. But you got me into this very exciting topic of blockchain. So let's talk about it, because I love cutting edge technology. If you want to get a very hyper Olga, talk to me about the disruptive technology. I'll start jumping and waving my hand, so you're getting that. So let's talk about TRM Labs. What is it, and tell me how you got there.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And if you want to get a very excited Ari Redbord, it's the same these days. And, quite honestly, look, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was focused on prosecuting cases. Some of those involved cryptocurrency, because honestly, as crypto expands, we're going to see more and more illicit actors trying to use it to obfuscate law enforcement, to avoid sanctions, et cetera. And when I got to Treasury, we really started to focus on it. And as you can see from, FinCEN's recent sort of real thought leadership in how to regulate crypto, that was obviously something I was living through at Treasury. So I said to myself, all right, so what's next? What's the next adventure? And I started to look around in the fintech world and blockchain. And I said to myself, something, I could actually go to a place like TRM that continues this mission of protecting the financial system from illicit actors. And that it's just been so incredibly exciting for me. What we really are is sort of the next generation blockchain intelligence company. We are trying to sort of understand, how to help businesses and government investigators keep illicit actors off of their platforms and really away from the crypto ecosystem. And it's been an amazing journey. I mentioned earlier, like, I never thought I'd have more fun than I did, 15 years ago as a domestic violence misdemeanor prosecutor in court every day, helping, folks that really needed it. And I think I may have found something even more exciting, which is a startup that's on a mission. And it's been a really, really fun, but admittedly short, about 5 months into this role, journey. And just like you said, you want to get an excited Ari Redbord. This is a topic.
Yeah, I actually, look, I mean, I had a very brief stint as a prosecutor, not nearly as high profile as yours. But I did have a pleasure of being a deputized DA in San Francisco under Kamala, actually, in her office for about 9 months. And that was a fantastic experience. And, if you go to law school to be, in the courtroom, being a prosecutor definitely is the way to get to that. And there's something really exciting to do, arraignments every day and trials twice a week and showing up and talking to people and telling them.
It's really, I think you make a fabulous point, and obviously I'm very biased here, I think, but when you are a prosecutor, it's one of two things. Either you come in with sort of the personality and the sort of capability to make your arguments and to be in front of juries, or you learn it there. And you just absolutely nailed it, because what you did is so similar to what I did. And that is, you learn skills in the courtroom, no matter how long you're there, especially, when you're in a DA's office, a local prosecutor's office. There's nothing like it. I call it boot camp for trial lawyers. And honestly, like, people ask me all the time, hey, should I do pro bono work? Should I, go work for a public defender? And I say absolutely yes every time. Look, it's an opportunity to get in the courtroom. And quite frankly, I'm going to hazard a guess here that, like, you use skills that you developed during your time in the DA's office all the time, even doing what you're doing right now, right? And I'm not accusing you of cross-examining me.
That's okay.
I'm definitely saying that, like, these are skills that you develop, and they're important skills.
Let's just say I've had many witnesses on my stand that I have not met before they got on the stand. I had no idea what come out of their mouths. That's about the same as what's going on here.
That is exactly right. I say to people all the time, it is one of the worst advice that you ever hear from lawyers is, like, you have to always be prepared for, whatever's going to happen to a witness on the stand. And I have almost never prepared for what's going to happen with a witness on the stand. The key is to make sure you're able to adapt to what happens when they're up there. And that's something I think that comes with some experience.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I went to law school to be a transactional lawyer. So somehow I navigated myself into the DA office. And that was an unexpected turn of event. But you are who you are today because of the experiences you've had. And certainly for me, that was an important, iconic experience. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Not enjoyed it enough to continue on this path, but certainly enough to learn skills and go forward. But I do want to talk about, look, I didn't think I would be in-house, and I ended up being in-house. And my adventures in startup have been gradual. I started with a big company, Fortune 500, and then I ran away with a startup circus. And my companies over time are increasingly smaller and smaller and earlier stage. And so I had time to sort of acclimate. You just jumped into the cold water from government to super early stage startup, not just super early stage startup, but startup in blockchain and crypto. So that requires guts. Tell me how you got there.
Well, I appreciate the guts thing. I hope so. But quite honestly, like, it takes less guts when you, like, really, really believe in something. And I think what TRM is doing to sort of build this tool to really help businesses protect the financial system is just extraordinary. But yes, no, it's absolutely crazy to go from the Department of Justice and the Treasury Department to a startup. But, quite honestly, I think what you start to learn very quickly when you are in the government, or I'm sure this is true of larger companies as well, is you're working with small teams. And, what we would do as prosecutors, right, is we would go around and really literally try to find the people we most wanted to work with. People ask all the time, well, like, why are you working with the Minneapolis field office of the FBI? Or why are you working with the Colorado Springs office of HSI while you're in DC? And honestly, it's because those were agents that we built really close relationships with, and they became part of our team. And I think that is true. That sort of made the transition much easier, because really at TRM, what I found is an unbelievable team of all-stars. It's a small team that's growing, but a team nonetheless that we work really, really closely together on a mission. So like when I think about the things I really, really loved about the government, and frankly will just be so grateful for forever, is that like I was able to be part of great teams that were mission driven to do the right thing all the time. And it's so cool to be able to sort of transition that to a startup where I get to kind of keep the same mission with literally a team of people that I have fallen in love with, which is just the coolest thing.
Yeah, I am with you. All about mission, which is the reason why I am where I am today. So let's talk about kind of how you imagine this world of being at an early stage startup, and then what is sort of the biggest surprise in your day-to-day reality of being, I'm guessing, the only lawyer at a blockchain. Did I guess that right? Good.
I think that's a great jumping off point, because yes, so I'm the only lawyer and my title is head of legal and government affairs. But quite frankly, like when you're at a startup and you're building a business and working with a team, we call it sort of one-man armies. It's like you're out doing whatever it takes all the time to sort of move the needle. And so, I've really sort of had so many hats. Now, I think your question is a great one, sort of like what's the expectation versus sort of what do you find when you get there? It's so hard to say. It's like you can only sort of envision what you know. And really what I had known was, a short career in private practice and then sort of a long stint in government. But I think what I've learned, and honestly, what I have loved, is this idea that, you can be an entrepreneur, but what that really sort of means is that you are just doing whatever it takes, all the time to keep the team moving, to work closely with people, to do whatever the company needs. And I have absolutely loved that. It's been a lot of fun. I hear all the time, quite frankly, and I'm sure it sort of goes to your question, that it's a hard transition typically, a lot of times from government into the private sector, particularly if you're not talking about a law firm or sort of a big bank or another sort of larger company. And yeah, it definitely could be. It's different. There's no question. But I have found it, look, Olga, maybe sort of I had this entrepreneurial itch I needed to scratch for a long time, and I have just sort of loved it. But, the transition hasn't been hard, but it's been invigorating, challenging, sleepless, but invigorating.
Yeah, I mean, transitions don't have to be hard. If you expect that you're learning, and with learning will come impact, and it is a lifestyle choice, and the one that I made a while ago, I'm pretty comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's just a way of life. You don't have to accept status quo as a way of life. You can accept as learning and impact as a way of life. It's just a conscious choice and expectation, and that's your reality. You sort of you show up with that every day, so it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. I think it's a lot of it is mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And like maybe I'm picking up Olga-isms at this point, but when we were talking, a couple of days ago, you mentioned sort of the future is for builders, and that line has really resonated with me. Because it doesn't matter what your title is, it doesn't matter what your background is. I've done things in public sector. I'm now sort of at TRM, but really, I think it's what you do, not what you've done. And I loved that, and I think I've loved being a part of that at a really terrific company.
Yeah, the same for me. The reason I like early stage startups, I have been in early stage startup or advised them or in any way help, is that I truly believe that when you build, you make fundamental structural choices that determine the future outcome. And so I've been saying this for decades now. The future belongs to builders. You don't like reality today, get on the ground floor and start building, because then you make a lot of choices as you build that will determine the future. And it's a very powerful, powerful place to be.
It's so powerful, and it's a powerful line, and I'm going to steal it. You can trademark it. I'll give you credit, but I think
you don't have to steal it. You have a license. I'm a lawyer. No,
you just nailed it with that. Like, it's fun to find things that you can really just you get it. You explain so much in a couple words. It's fantastic.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I actually want to talk a little bit about technology, of blockchain and crypto, and kind of what excites you about it. It is, but people joke in crypto and blockchain that the best use case is a illicit one, and yet my guess is that people like you and I that live in this space not for that purpose. So, what is your vision for the space, for this technology, and how do you think it will transform our lives?
Yeah, no. So it's an amazing question, and I think it's going to absolutely transform our lives. I mean, we're building the next financial system, but you sort of appreciate this. Like, I talk to a lot of people now, sort of in the crypto industry or whatever, and there's the sort of their origin story. Their superhero origin story is that they were buying Bitcoin, when it was 200 or whatever, or really starting to get interested in the technology. My origin story is a little different. I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we really started to focus a lot of our cases on North Korea. And North Korea, unlike sort of other potential sort of rogue nation states, really never has had access to fiat, or it's been very, very difficult for North Korea to have access to fiat. So what you see is them engaging in illicit activity in cryptocurrency. We saw recently an amazing indictment unsealed a week or two ago on some North Korea cyber attacks out of the Lazarus group. But we've seen a number of different cases like this. And I just tell this story because I became interested in crypto because I was watching illicit actors use it. And I said to myself, look, this is going to be an incredibly important technology. It's going to be the future of finance. And I strongly believe that. But if you believe that, as strongly as I do, you also believe that you have to have anti-money laundering and terrorist financing baked in to the infrastructure of crypto. And I think that was the beauty of sort of TRM, is that when I got to TRM, I realized, all right, look, these people are as passionate as I am about crypto and about sort of the financial system what we're building. But at the same time, I think we uniquely understand that, like, you just can't let bad guys use it. and we have to figure out a way to thread that needle. I think a lot of times you're hearing these days, hey, look, we just need to sort of take the anonymity or the pseudonymity out of it. I say, no. That's like the power and promise of the technology itself. But what we do need to keep out of it is money laundering and terrorist financing.
The illicit activity part needs to go.
And I think there's a way to thread that needle. And that's the work that we're doing at TRM. And that's what's been so exciting to me.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool. It's actually kind of like a very sharp knife, and you can use it to cure and you can use it to kill. And that's why regulating it and judiciously and using it with intent and building tools of safety around it is super critical. And I'm grateful for people like you who get excited about it and realize the power and potential and channel that energy toward curing as opposed to killing, right? When I was in my last job, I very much, like yourself, and I'm guessing from your title, was involved in explaining this technology to regulators. I went to numerous Sacramento and Washington, D.C. trips and met with a lot of legislators and regulators to explain this technology and the power of it and what's possible and the implications of various things that were considered at the time. And to me, that was kind of the fun of being in-house at a blockchain crypto company, is that yes, you give legal advice, but a lot of the legal advice you give on highly uncertain. You're also giving the strategy around kind of how to shape the regulation. So tell me about, that aspect of your job. And then, I think that's where your experience as a government attorney would be highly relevant.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. One thing that's really sort of, I think like, every time Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary now says anything, or sort of coming out of the controller of the currency, there's a lot of reaction sort of, all right, this person doesn't understand crypto. Or I think what we right now in this moment have to be very patient. And the one thing I can assure people, having just come from Treasury, is that there is a team of subject matter expert, bar none there. I mean, FinCEN has an extraordinary team of, as does OFAC and TFFC, which is the policy wing, extraordinary expertise in this area. And the secretary and others are getting these briefings, and they're really starting to understand this stuff. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. But, look, I'm a career civil servant until very recently, and I believe in career civil servants. And I think that the expertise is there. Sort of how do I use my experience? Look, I think part of it, to your question, is I think I sort of uniquely understand how important it is to thread that needle. I think you have, on the one hand, you have the crypto industry and sort of true, believers that say, hey, look, we need this to be entirely, at least pseudo-anonymous. That's the whole power of this tool. And then on the sort of one hand, you say, you have this sort of example of the recent unhosted wallets, NPRM, where we say, look, every unhosted wallet essentially needs to be identified. I think that there's a place in the middle, kind of like I described earlier, where we should all exist, where we should have the power, able to harness the power of, moving money on the internet, but yet have the foundational infrastructure baked in to stop North Korea, to stop the Lazarus Group, to stop sort of cyber attacks, to stop money laundering sort of activities. Because look, if there's money laundering at scale on the blockchain, it's going to be unsafe to use, and we want it to be safe for people to use.
Yeah, we definitely do not want money laundering at scale. We know that much.
Well, look, scale. It's like it was kind of, I don't know if that was the appropriate term, was scale, but like cash is at scale. Like I think that's what people don't understand too. It's like like as a prosecutor, cash is king when it comes to money laundering, right? Like cartels for years have tried to figure out ways to bulk cash smuggling, across the border. Like that's been the nature of money laundering for decades. And honestly, crypto is more open, more transparent, and more. And
there is an auditable trail. You can actually
more accountable than cash will ever be. And I feel like if I can evangelize for anything, it's that. We have technology that can help us with crypto. We do not have technology that can help us with cash.
Yeah, no, look, I'm a believer. I've been an early investor, early advisor, and I even had a job. And my husband, I'm married to a very responsible, pragmatic man. When I showed up at home and I said, hey, I'm taking this job, he took a step back and he said, please don't tell me you're going to be paid in imaginary currency. So this is what you get when you marry your fellow lawyer. But look, this has been a fun conversation for many reasons. One, because you're in startups. Two, because you're building. Three, because you're on the cutting edge of technology. Four, I stopped count. I can't count today. Many reasons. I love your journey from U.S. Attorney Office to Treasury to early stage startup. I think it's really fascinating. Anyone who sort of on the path of building the future of money or the cutting edge technology, you have a somewhat unusual path. What is your advice? What do you recommend?
I think that's an amazing question. Look, I think so much of this comes back to teams for me. And, what I have learned, I think, in my career, and honestly, it may be even has crystallized for me recently, that careers can be a team sport. I have so many close friends from the U.S. Attorney's Office and from Treasury and from private practice, over the years. And, they are so supportive of what I've been doing, and I'm so supportive of what they've been doing. And if you can sort of build that team around you, I think the adventure can be even a lot more fun. So creating a team, of people in your life, but I'd say also sort of creating teams where you go and really gravitating towards people who want to work in teams. I had that look, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I spent a lot of time sort of in the well of the courtroom, in front of a judge or in front of juries, but I uniquely understood that I was never alone there, that I always had people at the office or who were sitting there watching who had my back no matter what was going to happen. And it was the same thing at Treasury. I worked for a woman who was the undersecretary for TFI, Sigal Mandelker. And look, I mean, she built an extraordinary team around her. And, we were able to work very closely with all the different pieces of Treasury to get things done. As I said, that's what we're building at TRM. And, literally we have a Friday all hands that I was on right before I jumped on here. And we are a family. And if you can sort of build with those people, I think your journey will be a lot more fun. And I hope a lot more successful as well.
Yeah, no, in the end, it's with the people for the people. Having a very interesting mission is definitely a big part of it. But having a team that supports you in getting there is like 80% plus of it. So look, Ari, I really enjoyed this conversation. Fantastic conversation. Thank you for finding the time to talk to me on this Friday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Olga, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to talking again soon.